Everything looks better with a dram in your hand.
Hello, and welcome back to week I don't even know anymore of the Cask 88 lock-in. It's been... Week 2? Holy shit. It's come to my attention that we're broadcasting this week on International Earth Day, a chance to recognise our fragile planet and treat it just a little better for a while. For instance, you may have noticed I'm still wearing this pink shirt from last week in the hope I'll save a little extra energy and water. And I'll have more tips like this throughout the rest of the show. On with the show. In my conversation last week with Mark Thompson, the subject of infinity bottles was mentioned. This is a term that has been bandied around for a while, but let me give you a quick overview of what an infinity bottle is. Effectively, it's a blended whiskey. Your own personal blend, as it were. Something that, when it gets too low, you just top it straight back up again with a selection of your own whiskies. And it's not sacrilege. Genuinely not. They can be completely delicious. They're always changing, and always adding new and different whiskies. Well, if it's not going a way that you like, you can top it up with something that you do, and these things can transform amazingly. And there's a bit of strategy behind it as well. Now, if you're a keen whiskey drinker, you may have a load of these around, bottles which don't have a lot of liquid left in them. You may also have discovered that the less liquid there is in a bottle, the more rapidly it changes, oxidizes, loses a bit of itself, particularly the final third. And this can be a problem, especially if you have some favourite whiskies that you're really loath to give up on. One way of preserving its memory forever is to take that final little bit of liquid before it goes really weird and preserve it within an infinity bottle. Genuinely, nothing should be sacred. Your favourite whiskies can go in there. And infinity bottles can be these weird and wild blends of incredibly old whiskey which is incredibly young, or stuff that hasn't even been made in the same country. You can do it exactly as you please. Anything goes with one of these. My own, well, there's a large white label on the back. I'm keeping track of what goes into it, and I'm hoping there's going to be many more over the weeks, months, years maybe. I might have to get another label. It started off with a base of the Hive, which is already a blended malt whiskey, and then has over time been upgraded with whiskies from Speyside, the Highlands, a Lowland. There's a grain whiskey in there. This is a true blend. And the most unusual addition so far is a whiskey that I really didn't want to let go. But now it resides within my infinity bottle, and homeopathically, it's getting stronger than ever. I feel safe to say that with whiskey, because this isn't medicine. Vaccinate your kids. So, while we're on lockdown, why not maintain the infinity bottle? It's starting to get quite low itself, so it'll get a bit weird if I don't watch it. Maybe topping it up with some of the other whiskies that I've got through while I've been in is an excellent idea, and the process of creation can be quite fun in itself. Going to start with a little of this. As you can see, there's not much of this singleton of Glen Ord left. It's not going to stay wonderful forever, so to prove that nothing is sacred, there it is from last week, the Glenturret 26-year-old. There's very little of it remaining, and if I keep holding on to it, then what is left is not going to be the whiskey that I remembered. And then, because this isn't a huge amount of liquid, and I do want to top it up a little further, I also have one of my all-time favourite whiskies, the Ben Nevis 10, a nice deep bass note, a really excellent and not too unaffordable whiskey. Now this is not going to be glamorous. Those of a sensitive disposition should look away now. So that's about 180 ml, I guess. This could take a little more. Yeah, time to introduce them together. There are no second takes on this shot, so apologies if it's a little ropey around the edges. The smell coming off this is already pretty special, I have to say. When you bring 3 of your favourite whiskies together, and you start identifying notes of them, and yet recombined in an unexpected form, that can be quite exciting in itself. Now you might think I need to immediately test this and see if I've done something right. Well, for a start, if I haven't done something right, I can't undo it. It's completely committed now. And a second thing is that whiskies, when they come together, they need a little bit of marrying time. They need their flavours to get properly acquainted and bonded together. So my recommendation is, if you are making an infinity bottle at home, well, don't immediately rush into it. Leave it for 2, 3, maybe 4 days. Let things really blend together. Put it quietly in the cupboard. It's not going anywhere. And after a little bit of time, you can bring it out again, taste it, and see what you have done. Japan, perhaps, might catch the last of the cherry blossoms. Or maybe Zambia before the sun gets too hot. Or a trip across all of this. This is another lockdown tip for how to save the environment. Plan loads of trips, and then don't go on any of them. You'll save a huge, unimaginable amount of carbon this way. I've already kept 383,000 barrels of crude in the ground where they belong with this method. Turkey, perhaps. Or Norway while the sun is still out. Now, just the name Glenfarclas is often enough to cause a little tear to form in the corner of any malt aficionado's eye. Well, be prepared to cry buckets as I welcome my guest today, Mr. George S. Grant, a member of the 6th generation of the Grant family to own and operate the iconic Glenfarclas Distillery. George, welcome.
Thank you very much, dude. Thank you for having me.
I think first things first, peculiar situation we're in. What whiskies did you get locked down with? What did you have on your shelf when things changed?
Luckily, I do have quite a wide array of whiskies lying around. So I certainly have a few in the house, and obviously the distillery is only 100 meters away, so it's easy enough to go and grab some more. I've got a bottle of 105, lovely bottle of 40-year-old, and I have one of our family cask editions as well. So it's it's always good just having a dram or two lying around that you can pick up at any given time.
So how have things changed for you in the last few weeks?
I've definitely become much more tech savvy, shall we say. And what has been interesting with it is the fact that every single country seems to use a different format for doing these online tastings. But it has been fun. It's definitely giving you much bigger audiences. But some of the tastings we're doing now, we're getting up to 3,500, 4,000 people. But then you're also seeing much more people getting involved. But I think it really has shown the amazing people that do enjoy and drink whiskey, because they are getting much more involved in it as well. Yeah, it's a nice thing to sort of, I guess, see the size of your audience. And I think one reason why Glenfarclas is so popular is you managed to keep it in the family for over 150 years. Is there a secret for keeping a business in the family over the roller coaster of time and changing generations? Just say no. You do also get an awful lot of offers and things, but you can only sell something once. I mean, it's definitely not going to be an easy road. I mean, when you do look at the history of Glenfarclas or the history of single malt, it really only is the last 20-25 years where you have seen such a huge rise in people drinking single malt. If you look through the history of Glenfarclas and the timeline of whiskey in that aspect, we've been through sort of 7 peaks and troughs. There's always been that boom and bust scenario of the whiskey industry, but at the moment we're in year 16, 17 of rises every year. It's just something that is absolutely unprecedented. And then we've been hit with this, but the resilience of people behind it, I think it's going to bring us out stronger at the other end too.
Absolutely. And sometimes bring them together if you manage to find a cask that's unusual. But of course, the sherry cask is really king with you guys.
It certainly is, yeah. I mean, it's we've been very fortunate. We've been with the same sherry bodega since 1988.
Wow.
Jose Miguel Martin. We've been very fortunate. They're a family-owned company as well. And but since then we've had a really good, constant, steady supply of very, very good cask. So
actually, having the consistency of the supplier, do you start to get a feel for the casks and a bit of predictability? Is there a certain tell that a cask gives off when it's ready, or is it still a roll of the dice each time? You think that you managed to get a much more consistent side of it, but I mean, one of the favorite tastings that I did was actually in Germany. 10, 12 years ago. It was 5 casks of 1967 from memory, but there were 5 consecutive cask numbers. Okay.
And they were all the casks were from the same supplier. They were all filled on the same day. They were all filled within a 15-minute window of each other. But you'd think that you were drinking 5 completely different whiskeys.
I think that's more encouraging to know that, because it just means that we'll never be able to completely figure out what to do with a whiskey. Each one is always going to have its own thumbprint, and we're not going to be able to ever sort of do that en masse and know what we're going to get.
But what's interesting behind it as well is, I mean, it's a relatively new aspect too, because prior to that we didn't used to not really drink single casks. It's only something that more sort of recently that's come about. Normally we would vat all the whiskey together, but now people are wanting to drink single casks. Yeah. You are noticing that different flavour of different years coming through.
Well, what are the responses like around the world when people find out what you do? Like, you may be in a conversation and then drop in, well, okay, Glenfarclas Distillery, I'm kind of responsible for the whiskey that comes out of them. Do different places have different reactions?
Definitely. I mean, you definitely have people that there are. Some people are sort of in awe of it. Especially because, as you said earlier, there's so few family-owned whiskey companies there, and the responses are always good too. I mean, it's people do sort of laugh as well. I mean, there's certain countries that you're almost looked upon as like a rock star.
Do you have a particular favourite expression yourself?
So people always do say, what would your desert island whiskey be?
Yeah.
For me, it's the 15-year-old. I like it. It's a little bit stronger. It's a 46% alcohol. For me, it's got a little bit more of the sherry tones coming through on it. It's still got the youthfulness and I suppose the aggression of like a younger whiskey, but then it's also got the depth and the finesse of an older whiskey coming through there as well.
Perfect. But I'm sure you'll be looking forward to welcoming visitors back to the distillery again soon.
I'll be delighted to welcome visitors back to the distillery. Laterally, once this lockdown does finish, I think it's going to take a long time before we do see an awful lot of more international travellers. But I certainly hope that you're going to see more UK people coming up to Scotland. They may not be as confident about going away to visit the foreign climes, but come and see Scotland. Come and visit a distillery. Come and visit Glenfarclas.
Absolutely, there's a warm welcome waiting up here. Well, thank you so much again.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and good luck to Cask 88 with their ongoing TV show.
Thank you.
You've stopped commuting and cut down the size of your carbon footprint to an adorable little baby boot, but you are still emitting some carbon. Every time you get up to make a cup of tea or walk over to the bedroom and then forget why you went in there and stand around for a bit, you're still exerting yourself and emitting tiny little puffs of CO2. The good news is you can still offset this in the comfort of your home with very little effort. Here's a garlic. And here's a bowl of dirt. Don't be proud, we can all make plenty of this by ourselves. Just need to take your garlic, put it in, and in some amount of time you'll have an entire garlic tree, offsetter of carbon and provider of tasty snacks. Just look at this one behind me. There must be at least 15 carbons in there. Go on, try it yourself. Well, life has an unpredictable way of turning out sometimes. Dean Jode was on track to be a documentary photographer when, as so often happens, a Scotch whisky tasting turned his head and changed the course he was on. Today, he's the brand ambassador for superb independent bottlers Murray McDavid. Dean Jode, welcome.
Sam, thank you very much. Life's a bit weird, eh? Not just now, but the journey. Photography has always been a passion of mine, but it was this whiskey bar that really turned my head to what the world of Scotch, not just Scotch whisky, but whiskey as a global category has to offer. Just the sheer diversity of styles and drams that were out there to be enjoyed.
Well, that's something I wanted to touch on, because I think that a lot of people listening to this, for them, a lot of this would be about the single malts, and the idea of variety is, well, there's a huge variety of single malts and they're excellent whiskies. But Murray McDavid shines a light on everything, not just the malts, but also the grain whiskies, the blended malts, the blends themselves. Do you think, from what you've seen, that we're heading for a future where whiskey in all its forms is going to get its proper appreciation?
Yeah, I really hope so. And what a lot of people need to remember is the importance of blended whiskies in the landscape of Scotch whisky. I mean, it would be lovely if we could be celebrating all day, every day, these 30, 40, 50-year-old single malt whiskies, but there's not much of it around in comparison. And also, you might have to sell your house or a child, to get some of these things. But there's certainly quality to be had with blends, and there's so much excitement. Certainly, that's why we introduced the blended categories and the grain, of course, into the Murray McDavid series as of 2015. The blended categories allow us to really get creative about our ideas of how we want a dram to be, how we want a dram to really sing and resonate with the different styles of distillates coming together, offering something a little bit different, a little bit unusual, while celebrating the traditions of the industry. I mean, what's in my glass at the moment is one of my favourite drams from the current series. Mm-hmm. It's 7 years old. It's the peat side in our blended malt series. Now, for me, this is a shining example of what we try to achieve with every bottling that we put out. Now, the peat side here, just 7 years of age. Now, 7 years of age, some people will see on a bottle, and immediately, they'll turn their nose up. Yeah, that's right. And even worse, it's got the word blended on. So a lot of people, forget it. It's a credit to the bottlers who are producing these younger styles with integration, with character of the original distillate, but with the extra bit of magic in there. The peat side here, 3.5 years in bourbon. The last 3.5 years has been in first fill port casks. We're really getting the depth of colour, the flavour in there, and with the youth of the peated malt, we're still allowing the spirit style to shine through. So for me, that's a real all-rounder, and that's what we look for when we're selecting to bottle. We wanted to keep that energy of the original Murray McDavid team in producing Scotch whisky that was pushing boundaries, not just keeping safe into the traditions. Of course, we have to respect the traditions, but also innovate at the same time. What we're doing is we're trying to communicate with the curious whiskey drinker. That's where I really get a kick and a buzz out of working with an independent bottler.
Yeah, deeply exciting, and I've got a proper thirst on now. I'll have to say that Dean Jode, thank you so much. That was absolutely enlightening.
Yeah, well, it's, there's what's wonderful is that I can tell you there's a lot more fun and enjoyment to be had.
Another episode of the Cask 88 Lockdown, locked down. I hope you learned a little more about the inner life of Scotch whisky, and also how better to live in tune with this fragile planet. I've started making my own clothes. Happy Earth Day, everyone. Now, last week I received a little feedback that my eye contact with the camera is, quote, erratic and distressing. Now, I'm always willing to learn from feedback, especially if it's constructive, so after the credits this week, I'll once again join you with a dram in my hand, but this time I'll fix the camera and your eyes with an unbroken stare for as long as I can manage. First one to blink loses. Stay well, everyone. Slanjiva.